Liz Worth is a Toronto-based astrologer, tarot reader, and author. She uses tarot and astrology to help people find clarity, guidance, and purpose. Liz regularly offers workshops and seminars about tarot, astrology, and ritual, believing these are tools everyone can learn and benefit from. In 2017, she was included in Flair's How I Made It list, which is a roundup of 100 Canadian businesswomen. Her horoscopes have appeared in Flair magazine and Spiral Nature, and she has delivered lectures on astrology, tarot, and magic at Reader Studio in New York City, Northwest Tarot Symposium in Portland, Oregon, the inaugural Love and Light Marathon in Montreal, and more. Hey, Liz.
Hi.
So good to see you, and thank you so much for doing this for me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so tell me, tell everybody just a little bit about yourself and kind of your philosophy on astrology and tarot and how your practice works.
Yeah. So I'm based in Toronto, in Canada, but, given our modern day technology, I work with people from, all walks of life in many different parts of the world, which is wonderful. And really what I believe practices like astrology, tarot, and other types of divination as well. This is it can be a big umbrella when we use practices like this within a spiritual and intuitive capacity. But I believe that all of these things, are not so much about fortune telling or predicting things like when will you fall in love or when will you get married or when will you get promoted, right? And I know that those can be popular questions that people come to with these practices, and I don't think there's anything wrong with necessarily working in that way, because there are some people who I think can do those types of readings and do them really well. But for me, I think it's always much more useful to use something like astrology as a way to understand yourself better and to really understand what is making you tick. And sometimes if people are bringing questions like that, if they're longing for a relationship or they're longing for some kind of recognition within their career or some kind of accomplishment, astrology actually helps us to go under the surface of that question and really ask, where is this coming from in the first place? Why is this need or this desire there? And what does that tell you about yourself? And what can you start doing that's a little bit more intentional to either understand the reason that's driving you towards that goal, or to see if perhaps there's actually something else that the universe is asking you to focus your energy on at that time.
That's awesome. That's actually just exactly the way I approach astrology. So I knew we were going to be kindred spirits. I knew it. So, gosh, you just answered a whole bunch of questions that I wanted to ask you. With the tag of this summit is create flow, balance, and abundance in a rapidly changing world. It does seem like we are moving at breakneck speed because of some of the planetary influences. Why do you think that it's important? Why do you think that astrology matters at this place in time when things are so poignant? We're seeing historical things that we haven't seen in our lifetime.
That's a great question. I think there are a lot of reasons as to why astrology matters. When we talk about the pace of life, I think one thing that I hear from people a lot, and that I have felt myself throughout my lifetime, is that there is always this sometimes it's a covert effort and sometimes it's very obvious, but it seems like from a societal level, there's an ongoing effort to make everything the same every day, right? We're moving towards automation more and more now. There's also, this 9-to-5 culture that we have, and a 24/7 culture really around the way we work. And we don't have a lot of days where everything just stops. And even on a personal level, a lot of us don't have very many days throughout a calendar year where we don't have anything on our schedules. And I think astrology is a really big lesson and a really big reminder that there is no day that will ever repeat itself, right? But we keep trying to have this repetition and have this routine and maintain this momentum and this steady growth around our economics and our productivity that is not mirrored in nature. And astrology is nature. And when we start to study it, it gives us the opportunity to recognize where we may be working against our own natural rhythms. And it also gives us permission. I think astrology is very empowering in giving ourselves permission to actually recognize when we need to slow down or when we need to shift our focus away from certain things. Once you start following astrology, you understand that there's a timing to your life and that there are seasons for you to be very ambitious and very goal-oriented around the way you may be working or the way you're earning money. And there are other times when it may be more beneficial for you to be focused on your friendships or building community or growing love in your life or starting a family. So astrology really allows us to be more well-rounded in that way. And that's really, I think, what a lot of people are missing right now in this very fast-paced world that we're living in, because we really have no downtime anymore.
I was just telling someone what I wouldn't give to be bored again. Just like a kid. You know how when kids are always, I'm bored, I want to go do something, I'm bored. I remember doing that all the time when I was a kid. And now I'm just like, oh gosh, what I wouldn't give to be bored, just for a few days, just to be bored and wonder what to do with myself. Every single minute is packed full of something. So I'm hearing you. You're absolutely speaking my language. So as we're mindful of this, like, that we don't have repetitive day, no day repeats itself, and we're all kind of in cycles and all of that. How do you think that astrology can actually how do you pinpoint that for your client?
That's a great question. For me, I really think it's very powerful to learn how to work with the moon. And that's one thing that I teach a lot of people. I teach a lot of classes around working with lunar energies. And it's also something that I write about a lot and I talk about a lot. For me, the moon, I would say the moon was my gateway drug into astrology. It was the first thing that I learned about. And at the time, I didn't really understand it as an astrological application. I was reading an article and I was in my teens and I read something about how working with new moons is a really great time to start things, and that you would have better success at following through on something if you worked with a new moon. And I didn't know anything about, moons being in different signs of the zodiac or the timing of a new moon or anything like that. But that, that little piece of information just set me out on this path to learn more about what that really meant and how that could become a regular practice in my life. And I think the beautiful thing about working with lunar energies is that it is a very accessible way to start with astrology for many people. We also feel so connected to the moon because we can see it most nights as well. And the moon helps us to connect to our intuition, our instinct, and it teaches us how to care for ourselves. And because there's a new moon in every sign throughout the year, we can use every new moon cycle to look at which area of your life does that new moon apply to. So again, it's not about setting intentions where you're trying to do the same thing month after month, right? You're looking at a new moon, and say you have a new moon in Capricorn coming up, then that might be the time to think about the ways you're working or about your ambition. But then months later, when you have a new moon in Cancer, you might think, well, how do I want to perhaps set a new intention around my own self-care routine or around my relationship so that I can feel comfy and cozy and reward myself for all of that work that perhaps I started out doing with that new moon in Capricorn. So that's, to me, that's usually a place where I start with people, is just talking about the moon and how they can bring that into their own lives.
That's awesome. That's great. I did a 15-minute mindfulness with moon consciousness training for this summit, and I just recorded it. For those of y'all, no, we're actually recording this on New Year's Eve day. So Liz is very kindly taking time out of her schedule to do this. But I felt yesterday, I felt really called to do a little training for this seminar. And it was basically about that very same thing, so we're clicking, man. We're clicking.
Amazing.
So tell me, I always say, I live here in the Bible Belt. So, I feel like the majority of people here still kind of have a bad view about astrology. And so it's for me, it's my passion to get people out of that mindset and start using it as a tool. Because to me, God created the heavens and the earth, and all for a purpose. There was a purpose with this. So that's what I believe. What are some of the misconceptions that you see in your own practice?
Well, I think where you're coming from with that is really interesting, because it does play into certain misconceptions that people may have about astrology. And I think one of the things that can be a hindrance, whether you're a practitioner or a client seeking things out, is this assumption that astrology gives us some kind of godlike power. And I think that's why it makes some people uncomfortable and they're resistant to it, because from a spiritual perspective, some people feel that you may be entering into something that only God or a higher power is really able to access. And I can also tell a lot by the questions that people bring to a session as to what they assume astrology allows me to do. And some people think that astrology gives you this omniscient presence, or that you're able to actually get into someone's head and read their thoughts, and that you know everything that they've been doing every moment of their lives. And that idea is, to me, it actually feels like such a violation. It would be such a violation if astrologers actually were able to get into someone's head like that, and it would be terrifying. And so I always think that that's a really big misconception that is important to talk about, because it sounds so far-fetched, but it's not. There are a lot of people who really don't understand what these tools do and what kind of knowledge can be gained from them. And they also don't understand that it's actually a very grounded process, right? It's very practical. It's something that people spend a lot of time learning. And that, no one is really out to try to read your mind or to do God's work. And I always tell people too, whatever is may come up in a reading is an interpretation. It's not the final say on your life. And we have to remember that astrology really isn't here to make us fearful or make us feel as though we don't have control over where things are going. It's actually here to help us evolve. And, we can look at a chart and we can evolve beyond the lessons that are in a chart, just as we can evolve beyond anything that's happening within our day-to-day lives, right? What we choose to do with that information is up to us. And so that's another part of the misconception that I find with astrology, is that sometimes people come and they expect that a reading is going to either tell them everything they need to do and every decision that they need to make, or it's going to speak to them as though everything is set in stone and that nothing can be changed. And really, we're just looking at potentials. We're looking at possibility. And again, because my approach is more about really choosing your own adventure, right? You're looking at, okay, what are the tools the universe has given you? what are the detours you're going to have to come across, and you're going to have to figure out which paths you're taking there, and what do you want to do with that once those moments arise? What are your choices there?
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's, it all comes down to, regardless of what an astrologer tells you, or what the chart is saying, we still have free will.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, there's nothing to fear, really. And if you aren't comfortable with your astrologer, then you need to find another astrologer. So, I mean, that's it. It's just not a good match. So, right?
Yes. And that I think too can play into the misconceptions, is that sometimes people also legitimately have bad experiences with readers, whether it's an astrologer or a tarot reader or someone who is using clairvoyance or any other kind of application in their practice. I've heard, and you've probably heard these stories too, but I've heard of people who have sat down for readings, and an astrologer will say, okay, well, you're not going to talk. I will do all the talking. And this is my turn to give my wisdom over to you. And that's a very egocentric place to come from. And I don't think that that's really the kind of experience that people should be having with any type of reading, really. They should be able to ask questions. They should be able to, talk about whether something is resonating with them or doesn't apply to them so much, or if they're confused about it. It really should be a conversation, because it's that person's chart, right? We're talking about their soul and their purpose and their reason for being here. So they should have some say and some input into the experience as well.
Yeah, I go through the same thing, and people are like, they told me, I just had somebody just recently, they told me I was going to be a singer. I can't carry a tune in a bucket. Okay, well, this is the reason why I told you. Things like that, it's just like, I know I wasn't going to be a singer. So then, once that happens, then the validity of anything else that the person says, if anything else that the astrologer says, it's kind of like in the wastebasket,
Yeah, absolutely.
So, let's see. I wanted to ask you a few more questions, if you don't mind. I wanted to ask you, what other factors? Because you have other modalities. So, what other factors outside of astrology, do you think that we need to be mindful of?
That's a good question, really. So the other influences that are happening in our lives, right? I think one thing that we always have to be conscious of is our own geography, right? It's easy to forget now that we live in a global village, right? And we have access to news and experiences from all parts of the world. Sometimes it can feel as though the world is operating as one, but it's not. And the decisions that are happening within even your municipal level of politics, the things that are happening in your neighborhood, the things that are happening within the country that you live in, within the part of the world that you live in, whether it's political, whether it's environmental, all of those things are going to have a bearing on your experiences, your opportunities, the decisions that you're making. And so, yes, we can use astrology from this very empowered place, and it can be a very individual experience to have a reading. When we start talking about our path and purpose, that's a very personal discussion that we begin to engage in within ourselves and with whoever is working with us through our chart. But we can't forget that we're still part of a collective. And so if you are living in a country where all of a sudden, maybe tomorrow you have an election and there's a sweeping new regime that comes in, then that may very well change the choices and the decisions that you are able to make for yourself down the road, because everything has a domino effect, right? So yes, we can feel like we're islands sometimes, but we're not. So we always have to remember that there are many other influences all around us, even within our relationships. I always tell people when they're asking about relationships, they're asking about love, especially if they want to know, when will I get married or will I meet someone this year? I always tell them too, that's a choice, right? Relationships are choices, and they require the consent from you and from the person that you're engaging in that relationship with. If you have a partner or you have someone that you're seeing and they wake up tomorrow and they decide they have to change their life completely, that is going to influence you, right? So we always have to be mindful about the questions that we're bringing, but also the paths that we assume that we're on. We're never walking those alone entirely.
That's awesome. Well, I had heard you say one time that you feel that people get too superstitious about astrology.
Mm. Yeah. I love this. I love talking about this because, we hear a lot now about Mercury retrograde, right? It's very popular to talk about. Eclipses are really popular to talk about right now too. And whenever there's Mercury retrograde, and I'm sure you have this as well, people start reaching out to me and they say, oh, is everything going to be terrible, right? Is this going to ruin my life? Or, they start to wonder, that if certain things are happening to them, they say, is this because of Mercury retrograde? And to me, we have to be careful that we're not getting into the territory of superstitious thinking when we hear about a certain transit that's happening, or when we're paying attention to astrology. We have to remember that there's still a bigger picture in everything, right? And that, there isn't going to be necessarily one planet or one influence that all of a sudden introduces chaos into your life for a few days or a few weeks at a time. And that's not really the purpose of working with astrology. Again, I think this is about being intentional. It's about paying attention to the different seasons and the different rhythms that we have, and to remind ourselves that the timing of our life is more than what is happening within our calendar year of 365 days. And it's more than what's happening within a standard work week that runs from Sunday to Saturday, right? And so we have to think, okay, what is the lesson behind the thing that is going wrong for me in the first place, right? And is there actually a lesson, and is it significant? Sometimes things can feel chaotic just because, stuff happens. If there isn't always a greater purpose behind it, if there is, it may be something small, right? Maybe it's just a reminder that you need to be more organized, right? Sometimes, I find when I get bitten in the butt by stuff, it's because I've said yes to too many things, or I haven't managed my time properly. But once we start wondering, if the planets are trying to mess with our heads, if they're trying to almost do things to us intentionally, that gets into the territory of superstition. And again, it's not about working with that energy purposefully. It puts us into this reactive mentality with astrology, where we think that we have no control, we have no say in what's happening. And we always have a say in what's happening. And the more mindful you become about those energies, in my experience, the less they actually impact you, because you do learn to grow with them, and you learn to go with the flow that they bring too. And so the lessons that they bring can get easier as time goes on, if you actually embrace them rather than fight against them and try to keep everything exactly the same all the time, right? Going back to the beginning of our conversation. That's also part of it, right? When we go outside of the flow and we try to keep everything too stuck in one way or too stuck in one routine, I also find that that's when certain transits really get to people, is because it's kind of like the universe is waking you up saying, okay, you've spent enough time focusing on this, maybe you need to look over here for a few minutes. And so it's really just trying to shift your perspective. But it depends a lot on, again, our own nature. It depends on how stubborn we might be. Depends on how married we might be to a certain plan or a certain path that we're on. We have to remember sometimes that it's okay to take a break. It's okay to take a breather. It's okay to, to pause and do something different.
Wow. You're a sage.
I don't know about that.
Oh, you're too young to be this smart. You're too young. You're too young. Well, can you tell everyone about your free gift?
Absolutely. So I have a collection of intentions. They can be used as intentions that you might want to set for yourself at at a certain, perhaps a new moon, or if you're going through a certain transition or you want to invite something into your life, you could meditate with them. You can just use them as affirmations or mantras at certain times of the day. But it's a collection of intentions that I've been putting together for the past few years. I share a lot of these mantras week after week, and because I'm always writing them, I thought, you know what, I'm going to turn this into something. So you'll get a little PDF collection. That's really, it really adds up to, I think, about 4 years of writing these little thoughts now. So there's quite a few of them in there, and they all have different themes. Some of them, again, can help you connect to creativity and confidence. Some are really great for supporting anything you're trying to let go of, or if you're doing release work or trying to initiate change in your life. Some will help you just connect to your spiritual path. And again, you can, do what you wish with them. Meditate with them, journal with them, use them as prompts for yourself, whatever you like. So hopefully they can help to keep you inspired throughout the year.
That sounds like it's almost a book.
It's not, they're really it's just a little sentence, right, for each one. So it's one little thought, but it's a nice collection, I think. So,
oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
That's so generous.
Oh, thank you. No problem.
Well, is there anything else you'd like the viewers to know about you, or?
If people want to reach me, they can reach me at lizworth.com. That's always the easiest place to start. And of course, I'm on all the usual suspects when it comes to social media. So Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And yeah, I love to hear from people. So if you want to reach out, yeah, you can visit my website, sign up for my newsletter as well. I send a weekly forecast every Monday that talks about the energies that are coming up that week, to also just kind of help you get a head start on your Monday and beyond.
That's great. Well, Liz, thank you so much for joining us, and I think you're wonderful. I can't wait to do more things with you. I know that I'll see you again. This won't be the last time.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, well, Liz Worth, everybody, be sure and click to that link down at the bottom to get your free gift, because I know it's going to be very, very, very awesome. So, all right, Liz, thanks so much, and have a great day.
Thank you too.